All right, I have an admittedly insane idea, but if I don't ask you this, it's just, it's going to haunt me the rest of my life.
Hello, and welcome to the Warp Shelf. I'm Frank Duran.
I'm Deshawn Vasquez.
And today we're talking about one of the best trilogies I've ever seen.
Not Lord of the Rings.
Not Lord of the Rings.
Not Star Wars.
Not Star Wars.
Not Toy Story.
Not Toy Story. Right? We're talking about the Before trilogy.
Yes.
Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight.
Mm-hmm.
Three fantastic movies that Deshawn has recently shown to me, but has been talking about to me for literally years. Like we've always been loved these like really personal, touching films, and then you were always like, yeah, this whole trilogy is great, and I'm like, cool, and then never watched any of them. And recently, we actually sat down and watched all three in one day, and it was really, really great to see all three in a row. I feel like it's almost, it would have been cool to see them as they came out, but I think it's really cool to see them all three in a row and
Which
compare
is how I
all
saw
three.
All in one sitting the first time I had seen them.
Yeah. So tell me when you first saw them, because we were in film school.
Before Midnight came out 2013, right?
Yep.
That was the same year that Her came out. So I was still writing for, we were still writing for Geeky Universe back when Geeky Universe was still a thing. And I was trying to come up with like my top 10 movies.
Yep.
For that year, and I'm just like, I've seen a lot of good stuff, but I feel like I haven't seen enough like indie stuff, and I should diversify it a little bit.
Yeah,
so I started looking up, just like, okay, what do we have? And the one that kept popping up the most was Before Midnight, and I never heard of the Before trilogy at that point. And it was just like, Before Midnight, I'm like, oh, it's got Ethan Hawke. I love Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, everyone loves Ethan Hawke.
Gattaca. It's one of my favorite movies. It's such an overlooked film. Like, Ethan Hawke is one of those actors, I feel like I always like him in anything he's in, even if it's not good.
Yeah, it's like the movie, so he's been in a bunch of bad movies, but he's good in those bad movies. You know?
And so I was just like, Before Midnight, what's this? I'm like, oh, it's about this romance. Like, it's like, huh, okay, that seems interesting. And then finding out, it's like, oh, it's actually the third part of a trilogy. I'm like, all right, then I guess I have to watch the first one then. So I got my hands on the first one, watched it, was captivated from beginning to end. In the same way, because I saw that it was also Richard Linklater, and I think at that point the only films I had seen of his was Slacker, Dazed and Confused, and School of Rock.
Yeah, which so you're you're like a romantic movie from this guy. Okay,
super captivated with just the simplicity of it and just the sheer dialogue, because I love dialogue. It's my favorite thing to write. And by the end of it, I'm just like, well, I have to watch the second one now, and then. Went through the second one, was even more captivated. I'm like, well, I mean, I gotta watch the third one now. And so I ended up just doing that on a night. Like, I think I started at like 7, didn't finish till like 2 a.m. And I think we actually had class the next morning too, but I didn't care. I was just like so into it. So then from that point forward, when people were talking about like their favorite movies from that year, because the Oscars were about to roll around, I was just like, you'll understand. The 2 best movies of this year are Her and a movie called Before Midnight. Let me tell you about the Before trilogy.
Basically evangelizing everywhere about the Before trilogy.
Essentially,
and I know you've gotten a bunch of people to watch it, and and for good reason. I mean, when we sat down to watch it, I wasn't expecting much other than being like, hey, Linklater and Ethan Hawke. All right, let's see this. And I was really blown away with is it Depley? What's her?
Julie Delpy.
Julie Depley. I'm not even gonna try. She was fantastic in the role, and the dialogue is so enthralling. Like you said, it just brings you in. The first film just is so simple in its concept: 2 people meeting on a train and deciding to spend a day together in a foreign country that they both are not super familiar with. Like, and it's so simple and so spontaneous
and so intimate.
It's like you can tell why they're falling in love with each other. You can see it. Like, both of them love saying these like bright, complicated ideas to each other. You know, like they're like, "Hey, this is a really cool thing," and you're like, "Oh, that is a really cool thing." You know, like, and like most of the film is them bringing up a topic and you being like, "Yeah." Like you're like that sounds right. Like you're like that sounds pretty good. Like
it's just it's very simple, but it feels real.
Yes, extremely so. There's lots of like insecurities in what they do and
yeah,
the way
and
they
it's
move.
it's not afraid to like hold on those like more awkward moments, because those awkward moments would be inevitable for like a situation like this,
for
where like
first time
they're
meeting
they're feeling it out, they're starting to become like closer, starting to like each other a little more, but there's still that like disconnect.
And
of
that's
just,
what's so crazy
yeah.
about these movies is you watch it and you go, this has to be improvised. They have to be like coming up with this on the spot. But then you see the behind the scenes, and then you like see the commentary and stuff like that, and you see that how meticulous Linklater is, but with every little move and every little like stage movement that they are going around, it's wild. And you gotta appreciate that. It's almost like watching a play. Like, I mean, it really is almost, because it's just two people talking.
People have described a
most
lot
the
of his
time.
work as like very play-like.
And this just the small movements have so much effect, and that's what I think captivated me at first, was so much the dialogue's great, but it's also those little like them looking away from each other, and then look that like they would never catch each other's eyes occasionally, even though they kept looking at each other and then not looking at each other. You know, like it was these cute little things that they just kept including that seemed so small and insignificant, but like as an audience member, you're like, oh, cute, and because they're not catching that, you know, like, and it's kind of it's funny because it's a cute movie, but it's such like a heady movie, you know, like it really all three of these movies are extremely like, yo, what if reincarnation is this? And you're like, what?
They get on like these weird conversations, which you can tell is definitely more Linklater than either Ethan Hawke or Julie Delpy, because Linklater is a very heady guy. I mean, you can kind of see that in almost any of his work, except for like his more commercial stuff, like School of Rock. But you can definitely see it in stuff like Slacker and Dazed and Confused,
where they'll just be like, and I'm talking really metaphysical right now. You know, like, you're like, what's happening?
I got super big and I just thought about the universe.
And you could look at the first movie and be like, oh, this is a low budget like film, and it's they don't have much to do, but there's really a lot going on throughout the entirety of the movie. I feel like it moves at such a pace too. Like, even though it's a romance film, the plot starts almost immediately. They start doing things. They go around town. It just seems to move at a very brisk pace, you know?
Yeah, and it doesn't feel the need to like contrive like melodrama at all. It's really just like
anytime
simple.
they have problems, it's like real.
Yeah, it feels organic.
Yeah, it's like no, yeah, you made me feel weird there by like dismissing that lady.
Yeah, the fortune
teller. Like lots of other like little things that you're like, well, that would actually happen.
Yeah, and it would happen this way as opposed to forcing it.
Yeah, exactly. I hate forced melodrama in movies that could be solved with a phone call or somebody literally just not lying to somebody else, you know? Like, I get it when you're lying to yourself, but when you're lying to somebody else just to like, or...
Yeah, and to be fair, people can do that, but the way it tends to happen feels super inorganic. It just needs to feel a little more plausible.
Yeah, this whole movie
as opposed to just, we need to do this because then there won't be no conflict.
Yeah. This whole movie seems extremely plausible. I mean, it seems so... There's nothing fantastical about it other than like the fantastic element of falling in love with somebody, you know, like.
And in that sense, it's magical.
In that sense, yeah, exactly. Is that like in that sense, it's like almost a fairy tale of a story, you know, like the first two movies are sort of a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Two is, we'll get into it, but two is more of like, oh shit, the consequences of our lives are creeping in, but we still gonna love each other. And then three is just like, consequences, bitches. And that's you can stop the podcast right there because that sums up everything. No, I'm just kidding. But it really, these are all three of these movies are fantastic examples of not just purposeful dialogue, but dialogue that can say, have a purpose, say what the director is trying to say, and also feel natural. Like, this guy's saying random points about reincarnation and collective thought.
They're talking about like
beauty and aesthetic. Like
beauty. They start to get into like feminist discussions. In the second one, they're talking about just moving like labor work into like industries in like foreign like third-party countries,
Yeah.
like third world countries.
It's wild because it's like definitely things that the director's saying, but it feels like it works in what these people would talk about.
One of the things I would pitch to people back when I had first seen the trilogy is that you get a feel for what type of people these people are in like what seems like nonsense conversations than you do in most scripts you could read.
Yeah, exactly.
That are actually focused on something to give like those key points and like telegraph what type of person this is.
Exactly. There's so many stories where you're like, obviously this is expository, you know, like they're like obviously saying something here, but then you like when we're talking the third movie, we have that whole beginning where they're talking about his books and like what he could do to improve his books or what types of books they are, and it's such a great way to get a feel for who he is at that moment and what he's doing. And they do the same thing with the second one before
Sunset.
Sorry, thank you. I'm gonna do that constantly through this. I'm just gonna be like
I do it too.
Is Sunset does it so well because he's at the book signing at the beginning, so you get a feel for what he's doing and it's being purposeful, but also is a great like stepping stone for the rest of the story right there. We'll get into 2, but like
and it definitely the beginning of 2 definitely just immediately
gets
addresses just like what were you wondering? What did you think happened? What did you think happened?
So, but basically for 1, I think if you had to take 1 as its own thing at the time when it came out, it's this really cute, really personal love story. And you kind of are left on this, like, what will it or won't it or will they or won't they at the end, which is actually like, and it's not like a melodramatic will they, won't they. It's like it's very much like this is like how people live their lives, you know, like
essentially
like what do you think's going to happen? You know, are they going to meet up? You know, like you don't know. And it's such a, if you had to take it as its own, it's such a great, simple movie, and I feel like it has to stand up to the rest of the great romance movies that are out there.
Yeah, you know, like the Before trilogy, I refer to as my favorite romantic film collectively. Like the
collectively.
whole, like Lord of the Rings is my favorite movie. Which one? Yes,
yes.
Same thing
Very
with,
true.
Same thing with like Kill Bill. Just like Kill Bill's my favorite.
Kill Bill.
Tarantino movie's like, which one? It's like, yes.
Yes.
So
both.
the Before trilogy is like collectively my favorite romantic film.
And that makes sense because they do such a beautiful arc. So if you didn't know, between each movie is about 7 years? 9 years?
9 years.
9 years.
9 years between both.
And it's like literally 9 years. We're not talking like, oh yeah, we got like a different actor. They literally waited 9 years and made the next movie, and then they waited another distance to make the
and that was one of the gimmicks that like drew me to like watching the first one, because when I was reading up on Before Midnight, I had heard of that like, oh, one story, then they didn't do another one for like 9 years. I'm like, that sounds so cool.
Yeah, it's so cool. And Linklater definitely has a thing for it, and now he's kind of like, everyone's like, do it again, Linklater. Like,
yeah, that was something that that was always something that that's sort of like a childlike desire.
Yeah,
I remember as a kid watching movies,
being like, oh, it's the same actor growing up.
Yeah,
like,
always being like, man, wouldn't it be cool if it like the same actor just like grew up and then they like shot it? Just like, of course, being like, that's not practical.
I think that stems from us watching Batman, though. As I was thinking about that, is that like we all watch these Batman movies, it's always like young Bruce, older Bruce, and you're like, wouldn't it be cool if that young Bruce actually grew up and then they filmed him, and that's kind of what you definitely, I think.
But then you're just like, yeah, but that's not practical.
That's
but
not
then
practical.
Linklater's like the one guy to be like, no, I could do that.
No, I could do that. Because if you didn't know, he has this trilogy, and he has another movie called Boyhood,
which was shot over the course of 12 years.
12 years. This boy literally grows up on screen. It's one of those like weird, surreal movie experiences where you're just like, oh, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like,
it's a really like poignant, just like simple coming of age story, and I get both like the appeal for it, and I do like it, and sort of like the discourse around it because it got a lot of buzz around the time, and I can see why people feel like it's just kind of there.
A gimmicky thing.
But it's just one of those things like, well, if you're familiar with his work up until that point, you know that this is exactly sort of a natural evolution for him.
Absolutely.
And much like the Before trilogy, it's about like the small moments more than like forcing melodrama. That's
exactly
why I liked Boyhood as much as I did.
Yeah, I like Boyhood. I think it's one of the better movies I've ever seen in my life. It's just one of those ones where you're just like, Jesus Christ. Like, and it's so simple and so poignant. But also he has a new one coming out, which he's filming over 20 years. So that won't come until 2040 or something like that. So I mean, prepare now, I guess. Get on the hype train now. Get on that movie.
And the funny thing is that Ethan Hawke's in Boyhood as well as the dad.
Yeah, you're
so
just
like, wow, Ethan Hawke's just on this roller coaster ride with Linklater of just like these long decades worth of projects.
I know. I'd be so worried I would lose that actor is what I would think the whole time is be like, we are absolutely not going to get Ethan Hawke back. You know, like, and Ethan Hawke's like, no, I'm a good guy. Of course I'll film your movie over 12 years. And you're like, what the fuck? It's just like, okay. Like,
yeah, even beyond that, just the idea of financing that.
Right?
That's my thing. Just like,
who paid for that?
Like,
movie?
What crazy producer was just like, yeah, this seems like a viable option to do.
I have no clue.
Just like really betting on that horse. I mean,
they're like, this one's going to be good.
It worked out for Boyhood just for the accolades alone, but it's just like,
for me, it would kill me as a writer. How could you write a script and over 12 years be confident that that script is solid and that you had filmed it and it's going well?
Well, that's the thing. Like, the thing with Boyhood, same thing with the Before trilogy, is that it had shifted based on like what point in the lives the actors were at.
Yeah.
So like Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy were involved, uncredited, with Before Sunrise.
Yeah.
But then they became much more heavily involved with the two other ones because they would co-write it with them.
Yeah.
And they would incorporate with how they were feeling at that point in time into like the dialogue and stuff. The same thing sort of happened with Boyhood, where like there was a set script, but then that would shift based on how the actor playing the boy would feel about his time, stuff that he was going through, and that would be incorporated.
Yeah. It's wild. One of the things that I love also about him doing real time is you get to see Linklater grow up. You get to see his cinematography change and get better, and his storytelling techniques get even more refined. Like Before Sunrise is fantastic. It's one of those like masterful classic films that you'll like see forever and be like, great. You know, like, wow, awesome.
It's very French.
It's very French. Yeah. And then Before Sunset comes out, and already from the beginning, they hold this long shot of him just talking, and then they hold it as he leaves the bookstore, and you're already like, oh, Linklater flexing. What the fuck? You're like, what's going on? Like, everybody's flexing there, though. It's not just Linklater being like, let's hold a one shot. That means that Ethan Hawke stepped it up, Depley stepped it up. You know, like, everybody was like, we can do this. And they don't hold the shot for the entire film because that would be ridiculous, but like it is a long shot and you're like, damn. It just shows their acting chops, the cinematography step up. Or you go into the second one being like, everybody's grown up already. Like, and then Before Midnight is just like Linklater being like, oh yeah, I'm the best. Like, let me show you some shots. Like, and he really shows off the Greek countryside. But let's go into the second one. I think, we won't. I feel bad because we can't not talk about the second one and the third one without spoiling the first one.
Yeah,
that's just the thing. So if you guys are listening and you haven't seen these movies, I absolutely say go home, watch these movies. They are touching, fantastic. You could watch it with anybody. It is a great trilogy of films.
Absolutely.
But we are about to spoil them and we're about to move forward. So. Bye, guys. We're about to get deep.
So going into like full spoiler territory, by the end of Before Sunrise, what did you assume happened? Because you knew there were sequels coming already, so they had to meet up somehow.
They had to meet up somehow, but I had a feeling that there was no way they met up the year that they said that they were going to
do it in like 6 months.
Yeah, like they said they were going to do 6 months, and knowing that there was a trilogy, there was 2 more movies, I was like, they have to meet up, but it is so much more realistic. Like, I'm thinking Linklater's like, oh, is it realistic for them to have met up or not? It's so much more realistic to not have met up, and then they meet up years later when they're already established in life, because that's tragic. And then Linklater's like, yeah, that's what I did. And you're like, oh damn. That's really what makes the second movie so damn compelling, is that the first movie seems so young and youthful and hopeful, and so just like, sure, we're talking about these big heady things, but like, we have our whole lives ahead of us. What if we fell in love, and what if this all happens? Like we don't know the future. They even like touch on that with the fortune teller. They're like, that he's all like, I don't care about the future, and she's like, but look, the future, and and it's kind of funny because then they go into the second movie and it's him who showed up and she didn't show up for it, and you're kind of like,
it's funny how the especially when you rewatch them a lot, like I have, how many like parallels are there?
Yeah,
like not only the stuff with the fortune teller, but like little things about them changing as people as they get older. Like they have the conversation about reincarnation in the first one. Do you believe in reincarnation? Both of them say yes.
Yeah,
that question comes up again in the second one, and both of them say no.
Yeah, and you're like, oh, what?
Because they've gotten older.
Yeah, it's like a lot of that hope is gone.
And they don't even bring up the fact that they had this conversation already.
No.
They don't even realize that, like, oh, wow, we actually did used to, like, believe in that stuff when we were just, like, young.
It's just kind of like, nope, we're moving on, you know, like, and that's what's great about 2 is it feels so... It sounds stupid, but adult. Like, Before Sunrise is definitely a very adult film, but Before Sunset feels even more like, okay, we are in our lives here. You know, like this is like I have a kid. Like we have wives. Like we have,
and I don't even have much time to talk to you because I have a plane to catch.
Yeah, like it's not even just like, oh, let's spend a day. It's like, oh, I need to catch up with you because I haven't seen you in years.
And this might be the last time. I was not expecting this.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting this.
It's just like trying to race to just like catch up as fast as possible before I have to leave again.
And that's what 2, I feel, has the briskest pace, because it immediately is like, we got to catch up. We got to like we got to
and it's the shortest
and you
one.
can feel it. They want to latch onto each other's lives, like they like have not had each other in their lives, and then they're in the same room and you can see it, like they can feel it.
And they're both like almost like immediately ready to just like connect, and just like pick things up where they left off, but they have like the obstacles in their own lives that they've had without each other that are just like right there wedged.
Yep, right there in front of them. And it's like, it's funny because those barriers are so real and so important, but in the movie and to them, it didn't even seem like it was there, because like before sunset, before sunset,
rises,
sunrise. Sorry, before sunrise, they mostly. Sorry, I got confused. I fucking lost my train of thought because I said the wrong title. I was like, damn it.
We were talking about like obstacles in their lives wedged between.
Before, it just seemed like there was no obstacles. It's all this openness, and then now it's all there in front of them, and they don't even look at it in before sunset. In the second one, because it's not there in front of them. That's what's interesting about this whole thing, is that they are not living their normal lives. They are on a vacation.
Yeah.
So like every time,
Celine lives there, but she's in a relationship with someone who's like a photographer and like wars and stuff like that. So he's like always gone.
Yeah.
And he lives in the U.S. and he's in Paris for like today. So they're sort of like trapped in like this sort of special place where they can sort of like reach out that way, because everything's sort of on the back burner.
And what's interesting about Before Midnight is it's like, it's not their normal life again, but they've brought their normal life with them this time, instead of where the first one where they leave all normal life behind.
Yeah,
that's why it feels more fairy tale.
Yeah, because they're both out of their element.
2 feels more of an adult. It's not a fairy tale. It's very much like, what were the consequences of our last time we met, and what do we do now? And then 3 is strictly consequences.
Yeah, we had said that.
It's strictly,
I mean, it's true.
It's just like, hey.
But I go back and forth all the time as to whether or not Sunset or Midnight are my favorites. Like 2, 3, I go back and forth constantly.
It's hard.
I love the place where the second one is.
Yeah.
Where it's that sort of anxiety of just like, did they, didn't they, did they meet up, did they not?
It's so great to watch all three of them together because you get that like, oh, like did they or did they not? Like it's so just like and then you're watching the movie the whole time being like, once even after finding out if they or did they, you're still sitting there being like, will they, won't they? Like like
the whole time, and then it just that's that like tension. It becomes like more friendly. They're just having like a friendly chat. Then they start talking about like more intimate things, and then they both start to like sort of boil up with just like this stuff that they've repressed over the years because they haven't seen each other for so long. And you're like, jeez.
But that's how it's what's great about it is it feels so natural. It's like they start off so collegiate, and then they start to get into each other's lives, and then once they're in like knowing about each other's lives, they like personally assess each other's lives, like,
the thing is, because the dialogue is so natural and it doesn't feel the need to force feed you exposition, when stuff comes up that you're not expecting, like Celine just nonchalantly says like, oh, so I read in the article that you have a wife and a son.
Yeah.
It's such like a casual thing because that's how it would come up. But then as a viewer, you're just like, no.
Yeah, you're like, oh. Yeah. And 2, even though it's the shortest, it's so striking. Yeah. I feel like 2 feels so breakneck. It feels like lovers just trying to like reach out in the fucking ocean of nothingness, like 1 feels so just like, and then 2's just like, God, gotta grab onto you, you know, like it feels like 2 lovers lost in a storm, and then 3's just like, no, that wasn't the storm, like, and you're like, shit, and I think 2 is so strong in that aspect where it feels maybe the realist, like it feels so real, and then 3 comes along and that's obviously the realist, like but you're just like, whoa.
I just love the sense, like the feeling that the second one gets me of just like that anxious, just like, did they, didn't they, will they, won't they? Yeah. And plus I like love the way it's shot. I feel like I'm transported to Paris whenever I watch like before.
You feel that's what's great about all 3 of these movies. You feel like you're transported to all 3 of these places. They do such a good job of just being like, the setting's part of it. You're like, and at first, usually the setting's part of anything, but it's usually background dressing. It feels so a character, like, and I'm not just saying that. It's like Germany feels so different than Paris when they're going around to it, and then when they're in Greece in Before Midnight, you're just kind of like, this is completely different, like. And it's also important in what they are exploring. So we have the first one where they're mostly exploring streets. They're just walking around a city. They're walking around Germany. It's like claustrophobic. It's small. It's personal. It's just them. And the world's big and out there, but it's just them.
Yeah.
And then you have 2. You have 2, which you're in Paris, and it just feels so like you're also on the river the whole time, so it feels moving. Everything feels like, oh shit, we got to grab each other because everything's moving down the river. And at the end of the boat ride, he could lose her. He has to get on that, he has to get to his car.
And then it gets to the car, and then they're like going up the stairs. Everything feels just like everything feels like I just don't have enough time to say what I want to say.
And then Before Midnight is so crazy because Greece feels so open and so it should be relaxing, after all the other ones, which were like vacations, but adventure vacations, this feels like a vacation, and then it's not relaxing.
Yeah.
At all. Look, you're just like, shit, Greece, what the fuck? You're just like, but also what's so funny is it feels more like a Greek tragedy also in a way, like as much as 1 feels like a German fairy tale maybe, and then 2 is more of a Paris love story. We have a Greek tragedy from Before Midnight, sort of, like you're just like,
there's like such interesting parallels with it. And by the time you get to the end of the second one, we're getting a third one.
Yeah,
even if it took a while, just because of the way it ends, with the implication that like it's just like, oh, you're gonna miss that plane. And he's just like, I know. He's just like, oh, he's staying.
Oh man,
he's staying.
I love that line though. I love that. That line right there should go down in the same history as like as Casablanca's like lines. Like it's like that line, like you're gonna miss your plane. I know is so filled dripping with plot and also so intimate and personal to them that you're just like,
yeah, he's just
damn,
like,
Linklater.
because he's already like reaching out the entire time. But by the time you like get up to her apartment and she like sings them the song on the guitar and she's like dancing to some music, he's like completely captivated. And he's just like, I'm about to give up everything.
Yeah. And he even says it in Before Midnight. I gave everything for your singing, but like, which is an asshole thing to say, but also
we'll get to that.
we'll get there. But it's so funny because it's not a lot like they are not touching each other, they're not kissing each other. The whole movie, like the first one feels so like new love, like touching each other and everything, and then 2 feels more
repressed,
and
you're just like, ugh.
And it adds that anxiety of the entire
it's like they
film.
sprung a leak, and it's just there's like little moments of it that just kind of sprinkle out, and you're just like, do it. But I know you can't because you both have your own lives now. But you're like, but what if you did?
And what if you did? And then Before Midnight is obviously your answer to Before. Like, what did they do? You know, like it's just like it is. What happens when these two people who have lived star-crossed lives with each other? What happens when these star-crossed lovers actually sit down and have a life together, you know?
Which is Consequences.
It
opens immediately with Jesse with his son from his previous marriage.
Yeah.
Which is good because one of the criticisms for Before Sunset is actually for like Jesse's characterization of him like abandoning like his wife and son, who were just kind of throwaway lines in the second movie. So I'm glad that Before Midnight was immediately just like, oh no, we took this seriously.
Yeah, they were like, no, this was a problem.
Yeah.
Like, and Before Midnight is so striking to me. It's got to be my favorite of the series. As much as I love the other two, they're so good
and
so hopeful. 3 fills me with anxiety, dread, and just so it's like seeing my own parents divorce again. You know, I know that sounds fucking bad,
no, it's true,
but
though.
like it is literally. I when I was younger, I witnessed my parents getting divorced, and watching this was like exactly the same fucking thing. And you're just like sitting there being like, "Ah!" It's like I feel like I would have been crying if I had not recently cried at a Marriage Story. If Marriage Story hadn't already hit me in my divorce feels, I would have been right
if you
there.
weren't already numb.
If I wasn't already numb, I would have been right there with Before Midnight. Before Midnight, to me, is so masterful because dialogue-wise, we get the same fantastic dialogue the entire time. The blocking is top-notch this time. Like, most of the film is either in the countryside with their friends or in these hotel room that they have. And
because Jesse's basically on a writing retreat.
Yeah.
With like a fellow writer who invites him out to this like beautiful like villa in like the southern Peloponnese, and so his family's there, stuff like that. They're all just hanging out, and it's clearly the first like vacation that they've had in a long time because they have to take care of like the kids because they're a mother and father now. They have twins.
Yeah. And they're immedially fighting. Like the movie starts and like you're immediately like you're happy to see them, and you're like that's the funniest thing is you go from watching the first 2 movies and you go into 3 being like, wow, look at these great people I like. They're finally together. This is gonna be awesome. And then you're like, oh no.
Your reaction to it was like my reaction to it when I was first watching it because I was watching you like you had the biggest grin on your face because they teased you.
I felt like such a dummy. I really did because I was like, wow, I love these people.
Because
so excited.
he takes his son off and you're just like, okay, that probably would have happened. I hope he at least has a good relationship with them now, but they're clearly not with them.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, he's walking out. And the way the camera just follows it, I'm just like, are we going to see Celine? We're going to see Celine. Celine's just waiting there by the car, just like normal. It's just like, they're fucking together. They're together. And then the camera pans over and you see the 2 kids like, and they have kids. Ah! So the whole time,
it's like weirdly hype. You feel like you're like, hey!
The beginning of the car ride, you're just like, oh my god, they're together. It's just so precious to just see them together, like no obstacles, like it's just finally here.
But then okay. So one of the things that Linklater does so well here is how realistic the fights are, and it starts right there.
Yeah.
Is that he says a small thing about. Maybe moving back to America. You didn't even say it. He implies that that they might have to move back to America to take care of his now in high school son, which like it's funny because it's so questionable, but it's so realistic. It's so just
that's actually good to like talk more about when we get to like the fight.
Yeah, is that this starts here, and it's so funny because she picks up on things that are not said, and that's the realistic part about fighting with your significant other. As I can say from experience of being in a 10-year relationship with a single lady, is that most fights stem from not what you said, but what you implied, and what here is. That's the entire car ride is being like, what is Ethan Hawke really saying?
And it starts off pretty domestic, and that's what it feels most realistic because it doesn't kind of start off lovey-dovey. Like you're enjoying the novelty of seeing them together finally, but like they've just been together. Like it's standard now. So they're just in the car. Celine just got off their phone. She's like having trouble at her job. She's like really pissed off. He just dropped off his son, so he's like a little melancholy. Yeah. And it's just like a straight conversation. Something that could have turned into a fight, but instead the seed is planted and it just keeps building up from there. And there's like little ticks here and there. Yep. So it all just bubbles over by the time you get to the hotel room.
It's wild. And it's so funny because so much happens between that. You meet the as I call it, the Greek chorus. You meet the rest of the family, these other writers. You meet these the people that are staying with them. And it's funny because I call them the Greek chorus because they literally, like a Greek chorus, comment on the situation that's going on. It's like Celine and Jesse are talking, and everyone seems to know what's going on and kind of already knows the problem already, which is funny because you don't know what the problem is and they don't know what the problem is.
It's refreshing for the trilogy because there's more people to like interact with than just Jesse and Salim on their own, like it was for the first two films. Exactly. Aside from like maybe minor characters who they would also speak to, they're a little more involved with that scene. Yeah, but it's also a matter of everyone sort of, like you said, everyone sort of knows what the problem is. I love, like, the Greek couple there. Yeah. Like, Stephanos, and I forget what his wife's name is.
Yeah, and that's so real.
Because you could tell that, like, they're a little older. You can tell that, like, they've probably already went through the fight that Jesse and Salim have had. They're a little more mature for it.
Yeah, exactly.
So they already kind of pick it out just like, yeah, we know where this is going.
It's so interesting because like you feel like maybe they would talk about that stuff, and that's not what sparks the true fight.
But it's still whatever they do talk about is still relevant. Like it all starts as just like a joke of just like, when is the computer going to be able to write a better book than you? And then it turns into this whole conversation that just shows you how much time has passed comparing it to the first one. Yeah. Which was in 96.
Exactly, because they start talking about it.
They even bring up the conversation.
Because he wrote a book about it.
Yeah, and there's a young couple there who were also kind of like star-crossed, and they had their own thing. But they had like the ease of access because this is modern day. So they like talk to each other, they Skype with each other. Exactly. And it's just like directly comparing it to Before Sunrise. They didn't really have that option. And it's how much times have changed.
Yeah, it's wild. It's so funny because...
Like they were so obsessed with like, maybe we should call each other now because if we call each other, we'll fizzle out. Just like, I just wish there was some way to talk. And it's like, this was before those days. You couldn't just FaceTime each other.
Exactly. And it's wild because it's so fourth wall breaking, but also meditative. You know, like
I think it knocks on the fourth wall, but it doesn't break it. It acknowledges it's there. It like wraps its knuckles on it.
Him writing a book about it is the rap on the fourth wall. Yeah. I feel like him writing a book about the first movie feels
not breaking
very
through it, but like sidestepping around.
It's mostly like Stephen King's every time he throws himself into a movie. He's like, "Isn't it weird? There's a good-looking author who gets the girl in this book. Isn't that
self-insert
strange
stuff?" I mean, like, Jesse in a lot of ways is definitely like self-insert, like Linklater.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Which, you know, and write what you know is exactly it. You know, like write your own experience. And
because
that's the whole premise of this.
Yeah, Linklater did have an experience. It wasn't in Vienna, but he did have a night where he just like asked a girl out and they spent like the night together in the same way where they just walked around town.
And he said he loved her ideas. She would just like say things confidently, and he'd be like, "Yeah, sure."
And then,
like,
unlike in the movies, they actually didn't meet up afterwards because she actually eventually passed away.
Yeah,
which he found out, I think, right before they were about to film Before Sunset.
Oh man.
And Before Midnight is actually dedicated to her.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. That's crazy. That's cute though. You know, like it's almost even sadder because like you can't have a movie about that love.
Yeah, I know.
Like, you know, like that's not gonna make a movie. You know, like so. But back to Before Midnight. Before Midnight, it's so funny because they have all that space, and then they get in the hotel room, and you're so happy again. You know, like even though there was obviously those problems earlier, you were kind of like, huh. That's okay. They're now in a hotel room and they're gonna bang. You know, like and it's funny because all the other movies they cut away when there's sex. They imply all these sexual things. They talk about sex, but they never show anything. And in this one, they're just like, here's a titty. And you're like, whoa. You're like, it almost took me aback, you know, like I'm used to this. You know, like I'm never like watching a movie and being like, oh, weird. What's this tit doing here? I'm just like, but it is wild in that movie because
it
they
felt
were
like
so
a contrast
restrained
compared to the other two. And the film,
but it also reflects how personal they've gotten together, you know?
That's why I like it. And I'm glad that they didn't do it until the third one. That was actually another criticism towards, like, Before Midnight specifically, that a lot of people didn't like the fact that there was a sex scene there.
Yeah.
Because they felt like it felt gratuitous. I'm like, no, you're missing the point
Yeah, you're missing the point. Because
not only does it feel
she's
more
naked for a long time, but it's for the purpose of that they're comfortable.
Not only are they comfortable with each other, but it's also the fact that we're doing a sex scene at a point in their lives where they're old and they consider themselves past their prime. And Celine's very self-conscious about the way she looks now because she's gotten older. So the whole point of just
real.
like the fact that, like, I mean, they're still a couple, they still get intimate, and Jesse doesn't care.
Yeah, it's so
because it's constantly brought up. It's just like, I've gotten so old, I'm like losing my hair and stuff like that. And while we were watching it, you were in the middle of it. We were just like, dude, she's almost like more beautiful now than she was in the first two movies. I was thinking
that too. I was thinking that is that she's gorgeous in the first one,
Julie
but
Delpy's gorgeous.
She's young, and in the third one, and Before Midnight, I thought she was so gorgeous, and you're just like, oh yeah, she's having issue, you know, image issue, but you're like, sure, you're like that's realistic. It's gonna happen with age, you know, like it's like everybody's gonna feel that way, that everything doesn't work the same as it probably should. Like,
or even like little stuff that ties back to the first film, like while they're kissing, she's like, oh, all the red in your beard is gone. That was something that she brought up in the first movie.
Several times. It's so funny, and that's what's so great about it, and why I say why we both watched them all three in a row, and why I say anybody who's listening should watch all three in a row, is it's so nice to see all the parallels. You know, like everything seems to come together in such a cohesive and nice way. Even though it might not be a nice thing that's going on, it all comes together in like such a complete way that you're like, ooh, this is nice story wise. Like,
and then by the time you get to like the hotel, you're just like tense because you know something's gonna happen.
You know something's gonna happen because they said that they didn't want to go to the hotel. You know, like, and you're like, oh.
And then there's also like the little jabs that they kind of throw at each other, like you know it's gonna turn into a fight later. It's just building and building.
Yeah.
And then like sort of like the big turning point, I would argue, is probably that beautiful shot where they're watching the sun go down.
Yeah.
Because there's like this the Graduate feel to it, where they're just like watching it and they're smiling and stuff like that, and like as the sun goes down, they're just like still there, gone, and it's just a shot of them there for like a sec, and like their smile kind of fades, and you're just like, wait a minute, what are you implying?
You're like, wait a second,
whoa, hold on,
hold up there, and I want to say that Before Midnight's part, like the hotel room scene, is one of the best choreographed, best dialogued fight scenes I've ever seen in my life.
As someone who loves writing dialogue and loves naturalistic dialogue, where there's a way to do exposition and get what you want to get across. You just have to put the work in. There's a way to incorporate it in a way that's not awkward or forced or feels like, why are you explaining this to me? I would already know this. Well, I have to explain it for the audience. Like the peaks and valleys of that whole scene with the hotel room building up to the fight is so perfect because it feels so realistic, like a real argument where it just sort of like escalates and you sort of calm down, but then one of you says the wrong thing and it just builds back up again, and it just starts and it gets more ridiculous until it just...
Oh man, it is so naturalistic. It's almost insane, you know. Like you're like, I'm literally sitting here witnessing this.
Yeah, you're
you
just
know?
a fly on the wall watching like an actual fight, actual people fight.
Yeah, and because they don't break the camera and the scenes go for so long, you're kind of like, you're even more immersed in it. You're just like, like they at one point they just stick to that one, like, I want to say chair in the corner shot, because it is just like, it shows the door, which is Linklater flexing again. He's not only, before he's like implying things with the scenery going around and everything with the, you know, like with the train cars and the Ferris wheel and then the boat. Even here, he's flexing even more with the door being there. That, like, that's what's important, is that will they leave? Like, do you stay and fight, or do you stay, or do you exit?
Yeah.
You know, like, and that's what's, I felt like that's always important in relationships, is that I always, and I'm not talking relationships like lovey-dovey, I'm talking any relationship. If you have a fight, you stay and you fight it out, even if it's like, you know, even if it's bad or something like that, you could fight it out or get to some conclusion.
Yeah.
You know, like, instead of just like, oh, I'm done talking here and leaving. You know, like, and that's what's so interesting about this, is that they want to talk about all these. But
that's the thing. That's like a pragmatic, logical thing for you to like think that way for a fight. Most people
can't. Like, yeah, exactly. And I don't blame them, you know, like, but that's what's so interesting about this whole scene, is that, like, you're sitting there being like, oh, Jesus.
And what I love about the fight is that they're both in the wrong.
Yeah. No, it's not like anybody's right.
They were both like poking.
Yeah.
The entire day. And there's like,
that's
little
what's so
stuff.
great about the movie, is you feel like you've been with them the entire day, even though it's been like 20 fucking minutes, you know, like, and you're just like, oh
yeah,
shit.
just little things. So, like, the implied that they might move back to the U.S. so he can be with his son. He's like, the idea is just like, oh, this might be like the end of the relationship. The fact that he keeps like poking about it. The scene
her
where,
saying she's old, like,
and the fact that, like, she never necessarily really came to terms with the fact that she's like a character in one of his books.
Yeah,
it sort of feels like a piece
super
of her
surreal.
is missing. Yeah, and it's sort of like uncomfortable. So there's that scene, and that was even brought up in Before Sunset, that it's sort of like odd for her.
It's just
so
like
the fact
weird
that there's
to
like
read
that scene
your
where
own life from somebody else's perspective.
The fact that there was that scene where they get to the hotel desk and the fan comes out and like has him sign both of them, and she's like, "Oh, I don't really feel comfortable with signing." He's just like, "Do it."
Yeah, he's just like, "You're part of this."
Yeah, and that was like unfair of him to just like make her do that.
Yeah, exactly. You're just like, no, it's not her thing. It's your thing.
So as much as they care about each other, and they would normally not say this. Otherwise, when you get into a fight, that's when you start throwing like the petty insults at each other. Like, she insults him as a writer. Like, he says some like really hurtful stuff. Yeah,
it's one of those things that you're just sitting there being like, ooh, ow, that was personal. And
it's interesting.
Like, ow, that was too deep. Like
I feel like the argument is so well balanced that I feel like no one's really in the right.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when I watch the movie with people, I always ask them, who do you like lean towards more, or who do you sympathize more with in the fight?
It's hard.
Because I get a different answer every time, and it's great.
It's hard. It's hard because,
and like, that's how good that fight is.
Yeah.
That you're just like, well, there's such like a gray area here that like it's really going to come down to like personal biases.
Like, I want to say Ethan Hawke was like, if we're gonna like get into who like. What's the problem there? It's like, I feel like it's Ethan Hawke is an asshole being here, but also she poked the bear the whole time, and then blew certain things up that like weren't things, you know.
Yeah,
like,
and you had brought up like the most logical thing is just like, dude, your son's in high school.
Yeah,
like there's only a few more years left.
Exactly,
like, it's really not
that's
worth
the only
it.
thing I could say against Ethan Hawke's moving back to USA is that like he needed you before. He definitely doesn't need you in high school. Yeah. It's not like. That's not going to be like, wow, okay,
he's going to
great.
exactly be the age where he's just like, I don't want to hang out with you, Dad. I want to hang out with my friends.
Exactly.
I got a girlfriend now. Leave me alone.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like,
it's just, you understand like that sort of hole that's like left in with them, where that's that sense of consequence. Like, you made the decision to be with Celine, you were going to lose your son.
Yeah, and now you have your own family with Celine.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, Celine tried to like reassure him, just like, look, you're still a good dad. Like, we love having him over. It's good that he gets along with Salim. Yeah. Like, they have a good relationship. And just like, you were there for him as much as you could. And even if, and he's like, and I would maybe be willing to do it if we could get joint custody. But if we're, and he's like, but if it's not, like, think about the time differential.
Yeah.
It's like, just for that one, like, purpose, it wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, exactly. It's ridiculous. And it's so well planned out. I feel like everything about that entire fight, dialogue-wise, to the way they move around, to the way they emphasize certain words to hurt each other, you know, is so well thought out and planned, but it feels so natural. And that's what is the magic of all three of these movies, is that, like, you definitely feel like this could absolutely be happening in front of you, but is so planned out and meticulously done that you're just like, dang.
So everything, you're just like, and you get those moments where they like start to settle down a bit. Like they sit down and they hold each other's hands because she knows she's actually trying to comfort him because he just feels guilty about leaving his son. And then they're mostly fine. It's like, but then he says the wrong thing and it just starts to build up again, where he literally like poured her a glass of wine.
You get like, so it's so funny because you're like, oh, it may be over. And then they hit it again. You're like,
God damn it. So by the time you get to like the really petty insults where they're really shouting at each other, it's just like, oh, that'll be the best thing you ever write, etc. And then like there's always the jokes of just like the way she like messes up certain turns of phrase because of her accent.
Yeah.
So it just gets so petty. So by the time you get to like the culmination where she says, I don't think I love you anymore, and she walks out, it fucking hits you like a truck.
Yeah. Oh my God. It really does.
Especially after watching like the first two movies, you're like, no.
Oh my God. It really like, talk about feeling like it hit like a truck. I was just like, I like leaned back in my chair when that shit happened. You were just like, oh Jesus. Like it's so funny because you get so caught up in all of this and so caught up in their lives, and you feel like, and that's what's so great about it, is that why you feel like you got hit by a train is that this movie is able to make you feel and understand and get what's going on and what their lives are like and why you should give a fuck.
Yeah,
you know?
And you're almost afraid that the movie's going to end there, too.
Yeah.
So you're like, no, please, I can't.
I really did think it was going to end there. I was like, oh yeah, here it is. That's how they end it, door closed.
But I think it's more interesting and honestly more realistic to have that final scene where there's like that compromise.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think it seems so realistic.
And he points out like the obvious. Just like, look, if you're looking for love, like this is about as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Like this is it.
Which is it's so funny because it seems so hard, but it also seems so loving at the same time.
Yeah, it's like it's a level, like the thing about Before Midnight is that it has a level of maturity now that everyone has grown up.
Yeah.
Like in like the decades past, that like love is a little more complicated than just the lovey-dovey stuff. Like it's always going to be about like the highs and lows.
Exactly. And it's just you're exactly on money there. It's like life is not what it was. I think that maybe the grand thesis of Before Trilogy is that life is not super predictable, and there is going to be consequences to when you want to be spontaneous. You know, like when you want.
It's sort of like the idea is just like the idea of like our fairy tale romance might be over, but that doesn't make like what we have now any more invalid than it was then.
Exactly.
And it just feels right. And it's good that it leaves on a more optimistic note, because it's just one of those things where like I feel like a lot of people I've also watched it with sort of panic. It sort of turns into a Before Sunrise thing where like you wonder if it's left to your interpretation of just like, well, do they stay together? Did they meet up? And in this case, just like, well, are they still going to be together after this? I would say I think so. I just think this is just a fight.
Yeah, it's just one of the worst fights. And that's the thing is you're gonna have a fight that's worse than the other ones. And that's definitely one of them. And I think that's what's so realistic about it is it doesn't. All of these just feel like slices of life.
But I do love the parallel that when you really think about it, Jesse and Celine, by the time you get to the end of Before Midnight with the big fight, have become that couple that were fighting at the opening of the beginning of the first movie.
Oh, yeah.
They were fighting
on the train.
Yeah.
You're so right.
The fact that they've become that.
It's so true. It's so true. It's all like petty and small and stupid, you know? Like
it's so good. It's so good.
So do you think there's going to be another movie in 9 years?
I mean, I guess it's up to them. Like, we're actually kind of creeping up on it now.
Yeah, like, really? Yeah, we are. Oh,
yeah,
Jesus,
2013.
We're old, bro.
Yeah, it's 2020 now, so like it's not too far off. So I guess
it's possible.
If they want to keep it consistent, they could.
What do you call that? Before Twilight?
Before Twilight? Before noon?
Before noon? Yeah, before noon would be a good one, probably.
But I guess it depends. I would say I think like it's perfect as is. It's like the trilogy, and I think you've done as much as you can by the time you get to
if
the
they
end
feel
of
like he's
Midnight.
got something to say, sure, say it. But like, I feel like this is great the way it is.
And I think like it's good to just like leave it as the trilogy it is, and I think you've sort of hit all the notes.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I think the only way you would be able to do anything from here on out now is if one of them died.
Yeah, that'd be a sad one. That'd be a good one to do.
That's about it.
Yeah, that's probably
or maybe you could focus on like more of like the parentage thing. Like it's been 9 years, so maybe like their twins are like starting to grow up and move on. So you can kind of lean into sort of like the boyhood thing, where like when he's leaving off to college and his mom breaks down, but like as like an entire movie.
Yeah,
that could be something. But as far as what it is, like I'd rather just leave it as the 3 movies.
I agree. I really enjoyed these 3 movies. I think it's we said at the beginning, I think it's one of the best trilogies I've ever seen, because I watched all 3 of the movies, and I felt like there was no weak points. I'm not watching before sunset and being like, before sunset and being like, oh, this is sort of weaker, or before sunrise and being like, it's the first one, so it's not as good. It's like, no, all 3 are strong, strong.
My idea of like a perfect trilogy, which is very rare, because even like the best trilogies like Lord of the Rings don't like qualify for this for me. My idea of a perfect trilogy is one that actually gets better with each installment. Yeah. Because even stuff like Lord of the Rings doesn't, because like I love Fellowship, but I like Fellowship more than Two Towers, but I like Return of the King the most. Like I prefer Fellowship to Two Towers.
I mean, you're wrong, but I appreciate your opinion.
I prefer Fellowship to Two Towers, and I prefer Return of the King to both.
Yeah, I love Return of the King.
So it's just one of those things where like it doesn't fit that. So it's just like, it's just like same thing with the Star Wars trilogy. Like Empire's the best. I don't like Jedi as much as Empire. So nothing like kind of qualifies as a perfect trilogy. This is like one of the few that does, because I do feel like they get better with each one. Like another one I would say is probably like the Planet of the Apes reboot, because I prefer Dawn to Rise, and I prefer War to the other 2.
Yeah, I would say so.
When it's up, because that very rarely happens. They tend to peak in the second one.
Yeah, right.
Like it tends to peak with number 2.
Or peak at 1, and then they're just digging for garbage, Like,
exactly.
And it's so interesting. I feel like this stands at the top of some of the best trilogies. I feel like it's just like, and if you disagree, please let us know down below. Please let us know the best trilogy. It's definitely not the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. We know that.
That's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing to talk about, which I want to do. I was talking about that the other day. I want to watch all 3 movies together, because I haven't done that yet, and really get what it is as a thing, instead of all my fan theories as I watch them.
Yeah,
they happen,
it'll turn into a whole thing of just like Last Jedi was the best, and we really should have just stuck with our guns on it instead of being babies and catering instead of pandering. But whatever.
Do you have anything else you want to say about the Before trilogy?
No, just I'd say go see it.
Yeah, go see it.
Or buy the nice Criterion Collection trilogy set that they have.
It was so nice.
Yeah.
It really was.
I pre-ordered that as soon as it was a thing. I was following it for years, because when I had watched the movies before, the first 2 movies were only available on DVD at the time.
Wild.
And Midnight was obviously on Blu-ray because it was a more recent film. And I remember years ago, like right after I had seen those movies, that Ethan Hawke was just like, oh, we've been talking to Criterion and maybe doing like a little trilogy set.
Nice.
And then for like years later, there was silence about it. I'm like, oh man, I hope that happens, because I really love these movies. And then once they announced it, I was just like, pre-order. I pre-ordered that sucker like half a year in advance. I was like, mine, I need it. And the fact that they went out of their way to like do their own like remasters of the first 2 films with Linklater involved, add a bunch of special features, commentary tracks.
So nice.
There's a featurette on Before Sunrise specifically that's literally just a documentary about Richard Linklater's like career.
Really?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Super interesting.
I'll watch that. I really did like that Criterion Collection. I thought it was gorgeous looking. Yeah. Like, and just opening it up, you're like, damn. It's like Criterion makes good stuff, but this is I love all the nice colors that are going on in this one, and it just feels so simple, like the series.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Please check out these movies. Please check out our podcast. Subscribe, like, do whatever you gotta do. And go to galaxyofgeek.com where we post this podcast and check out articles by us on other movies and trilogies and such. And thank you guys for listening in. Please follow us on Twitter. I'm yupfrank on there.
I'm Mod.
And we'll talk to you guys about best trilogies, or if you think that Before Midnight's not as good as the other ones, please let me know about it below. Or if you want to talk about divorced parents, please tweet it.
Oh God, the cheeriest of subjects to just talk about on Twitter of all places. The most healthy of places to have,
I'm sure it's healthy
to have like adult conversations. It's funny, Film School Rejects have that Twitter handle, One Perfect Shot.
Yes,
I remember
I
they
love that.
posted. They actually posted one from Before Sunrise once, and there was like one person who said like, "Oh, Before Sunrise is so overrated and schmaltzy."
Oh my God!
And literally all the replies were like, "Get him,
get that motherfucker!"
And it was great. I was just watching the fireworks. I'm like, "Sorry, buddy.
Sorry, buddy.
Shun the non-believer."
Shun. So thank you guys, and please subscribe for more Warp Shelf.
All right, see you next time.
Adios.